Hey guys, welcome to Tactics and Techniques Tuesday. We're going to start a series on the survival martial arts, secrets of the martial arts. Some of this stuff isn't just about survival, it's about the martial arts in general and how it's learned, the things that you don't really understand unless you've been through the system. So I kind of want to share some of these secrets before I get into some of the techniques and the tactics part. So I want to start with this first lesson, this first secret, I guess you will, of the martial arts, and I call it don't be sloppy. So I heard once that when you learn something new, in your brain you've got all these flat surfaces and whatever. So when you learn something new, it creates a small groove in your brain that represents that new skill or that new piece of knowledge. And every time you practice or you reinforce that, the groove gets deeper and deeper and deeper every time you do it, so till eventually it's ingrained in you and that it doesn't go away, and it takes a while for that to happen. So in terms of practice, what happens is that when you learn a new technique, you learn the skill and then you practice it, and that groove, depending on how you practice it, gets deeper in a different way. So if you learn a technique and then you don't really pay attention to the learning part, you kind of think you got it figured out, and then you go through and you practice it a bunch of times, and next thing you know, you don't even really understand it, and you're punching the bag or you're kicking the bag and trying to practice it that way, and then you're trying to use it sparring on somebody. What happens is you're not following that initial groove very well, so you're creating this hollow bowl-shaped valley with that technique. And the problem is that when it comes time to actually use that technique and you want it to be as crisp and clean as possible, you're not going to have that really to fall back on. So I think what happens a lot of times if you do that, you start off with this bowl-shaped things, and then at the very bottom you finally figure it out and it gets to be a little pointier at the bottom, and then you hope you stay in that shallow pointy part when you actually need the technique. But in the contrast to that, what happens is if you learn the technique really good the first time, and you pay attention to it and you understand exactly how it's done. That's why when you first learn it, you should do it really slow and methodical, go through the process. And then when you start practicing it, make sure you're practicing it as concisely as possible. So that groove that I was talking about in your brain is not this big hollow, empty bowl thing. It's more of this sharp V. And when the time comes and you actually need to use that technique, I mean, that's the whole point of training, really, in combat, is to be able to use it in actual combat, is that you have no choice but to follow that groove. It just happens. It's a clean cut, straight down the path. That skill happens effortlessly and flawlessly. I went into a Hapkido class one time. This is a great example of that, and kind of related anyway. And they said that there was 350 different defenses against a punch, and this was what the instructor was touting as being an awesome thing. It's great. Yeah, 350 defenses against a single punch. So I asked him, I said, well, how do you choose which one you use when they throw a punch at you? Now, at this point, I was already black belted years ago, so I was just going in there to kind of experience something new. Always been interested in that. And I kind of got that blank stare look. And it's better, especially from a self-defense standpoint, to have, if somebody throws a punch at you, to have maybe 3 or 4 solid techniques. If you take 350 and you try to say, well, how many repetitions can I fit? And then I start divvying them up equally among them, I'm really only going to get maybe 100 on one technique if I spend 10 years doing it. They say it takes 10,000 repetitions to master a single technique. So if I have 10,000 to split up over 350, it's really, the math doesn't work out so well that you're going to master any of them unless you do it for a really long time. So you want to focus on just a few techniques, practice them really, really well, and then you'll understand that technique, you'll own it, and then you can master that technique. And I've sparred with some really high-ranked black belts over the years, and we've done lots of training together, and what I've always found, and it always amazes me, is that every time you go through a system, you look at somebody's system, it gets more complicated. The techniques just to be elaborate, the skills, and all the things that they learn, the katas are way creative and exciting. But when you fight one of the advanced black belts in the system, it's always white belt, yellow belt techniques that come out. That's all we do, is really basic techniques, just really fast and really well. And that's really what it's all about. The secret techniques aren't getting to the secrets at the certain level. They're going to reveal the mystery to it all. It's about putting in the time and the hard work practicing these techniques, but practicing them well will save you a whole lot of time. That's the whole point of today's videos. Don't be sloppy. One other story with this is I had an exchange student years ago and came over from Thailand. He was a musician, and in the attic we had an old flute that was it was just up there, and he asked if he could practice on the flute. Sure, why not? Great. You know, he was learning the piano, so he wanted to learn the flute too. So then it was a summer day, and you know, I guess fall, or I don't know if it was summer. It was warm enough out that the windows were open anyway. And so he's out there blowing on the flute, except the flute comes in 3 pieces. You put it together in the case. But he had just the mouthpiece. And he was holding the mouthpiece up, walking around the yard, blowing just the mouthpiece. And it was like, toot, 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 toot. And I'm not kidding. This went on for hours and hours. And it took me a while to figure out afterwards what exactly he was doing, but he was just focusing on that part of the technique of playing the flute. If you could master just the mouthpiece by itself without any of the distractions, then it's much better to own that part of the skill, and then you can use that. When you do the rest of it, you don't have to worry about that anymore. It's already done. So as you learn a technique, pay attention. Pay attention to the finer details about balance, placement, angles, hip angles, arm angles. Pay attention to targeting and what you're going to use that technique for. And when you practice, be precise. Be precise. Practice it as cleanly as you can. In survival martial arts, we don't have 350 techniques total, because all of the skills and techniques that are in the system, a lot of them are based more on survival skills. And so the combat portion is 1/12 of the entire picture. So really can't fill it up with 350 different techniques. So for spending the time in the studio to master these things is, you want to expedite that as quickly as possible. So you want that groove to be tight, short at the bottom. Those techniques we'll get to in future videos about the actual techniques themselves and the tactics. Every Tuesday I'm going to try to bring another one to the table so that we can start building up a system. I'm going to focus just on level 1 stuff and all the things that we have to do there. There's a lot more of these theory and concept things that you have to understand to be a martial artist. That doesn't even just apply to tactics, it applies to the whole system and all the survival skills that come along with it. So thanks for watching. If you liked the video, give it a thumbs up, subscribe. Get to see what we got coming up next. All right, thanks for watching.